This is Sheriff Garry McFadden with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Again, we want to talk about immigration. And the reason that we're talking about immigration is because it's the hottest item out there right now, both locally and nationally. You can see that the presidential election will rest on immigration. North Carolina citizenship will rest on immigration. So we're going to talk about immigration. But here's what you have. This past week, the bill snagged the North Carolina House on Wednesday, May 15th. Why? Because of the language. But you have to remember that this bill is going to force duly elected sheriffs to cooperate with ICE. But I have here even more. Why even more? Because remember, North Carolina General Statute 162.62 already mandates every single sheriff in North Carolina to cooperate with ICE. So you hear all the news stations says they are not cooperating with ICE. We are cooperating with ICE. What ICE doesn't like is 162.62C. C says that we cannot hold someone inside a correctional facility after they have met all the requirements of their release. So the language here says this, that in this current bill, they were going to allow anyone to file a complaint with the state attorney general's office against a sheriff. That means anyone who may understand the law, who may not understand the law, and they were going to file a complaint against the sheriff. Now you have to remember, why is all this important? On this day, local sheriffs of the 100 sheriffs who sit with me at conventions, who talk to me at conventions, are here with national and local lawmakers who said their number one priority is to force local sheriffs to do what they want us to do. So this is a meeting that they had in Lexington. So how ironic is the sheriff that they're talking about are these sheriffs. So when the 8 African-American sheriffs, black sheriffs, took over the entire state of North Carolina, all major cities, including Mecklenburg County, this is what they produced, the Magnificent 8. So make no mistake about it. This is targeting the Magnificent 8. Now here's what we have. They want you to believe that this is who they're talking about. This is not who they're talking about. This is the Sheriff's Leadership Institute graduation. Some of us are depicted in here. I'm depicted here. But you have to go back. This is the sheriff that they want to force to do what they say they're going to do. So what about forcing this ICE to do a little bit more? And you'll say, why, Sheriff McFadden? Forcing the ICE to do a little bit more. Why wasn't this meeting about utilizing 2 federal laws? And here are the 2 federal laws. But first I want to say, why don't they force ICE to consider improper entry by alien? This is a U.S. code that they could use as a law and file a federal complaint. Or re-entry after deportation. So these are 2 federal laws that ICE does not utilize, and they don't have an answer for it. You have never heard local politician, state politician, or national politicians talk about these 2 codes. You don't even hear the newscast talking about these 2 codes to force local sheriff to do it. So why doesn't ICE use these 2 laws to force them? Here's what we have. Improper entry. How does that work? After a person is arrested, I consider using improper entry if they cannot determine the citizenship instead of a detainer. Improper entry. That means a person here is undocumented, so it is improper entry instead of using a detainer. So here we go again. Re-entry after deportation. Again, after the initial arrest, after we notify ICE through North Carolina General Statute 162.62, because we cannot determine their citizenship, but if they determine their citizenship and the person has re-entered the United States after deportation, ICE could utilize this if they want to. But you will never hear the state official, national officials, or even the local media talk about these laws that ICE could absolutely utilize. Re-entry after deportation and removal. That's what they're going to do. You've never heard and a state, local, or national politician using the words force or cooperation when you're talking about ICE. Lawmakers should use forcing ICE to utilize the two laws, but they don't. The lawmakers could say, why haven't you used these two laws? But you will never hear our local, national lawmakers use the word force or cooperation when they're talking about these two laws that they could ask ICE to use. So here we have it, House Bill 10. If it's passed, it'll probably be vetoed by the governor. Of course, we know they have veto power to override it. And so then if it passes, if this bill passes, as of now, July 1st, 2024 is the effective date. July 1st of 2024 is the effective date. Is anybody worried about it? Here's what you need to ask yourself. Who knows the answers to the new process? What type of order will the state magistrate use, not the federal magistrate? Because they will use the state magistrate after a person is held for 48 hours on a federal civil issue, not a federal criminal issue, a federal civil issue. What training have the magistrates have received? They have received none. As of today, I can tell you that the magistrate in Mecklenburg County has received zero training. Do the local magistrates know what to do? Why so many questions? Here's why. Because we're going to have to create a new process and a new memorandum to go with the magistrate to understand what my deputies have to do after their arrest. Why so many concerns about a federal issue regarding a state issue? We need to be worried again. Here's why. Federal issues versus state issue. Immigration is a federal issue. So the local state lawmakers are going to force the local sheriffs to do something that they are not mandated to do. And here's why it's so important to me. Chavez versus Carmichael was a lawsuit, but of course now it has my name on it. So if you look it up, Chavez versus McFadden concerning 2887G, the citizens of Mecklenburg County had to pay $80,000 of taxpayers' monies to defend something that we don't want in the county. So this is why we have this concern. Another thing you have never heard ICE talk about, local politicians talk about, or even any local news, the victims. The victims of the crime, you always hear them talk about the suspect. But what about the fear? And here's why. Local lawmakers never talk about how this could make our community safe, because they never talk about the victims. They always talk about the one defendant that they do have, but you never hear them talk about the victims. And how does this ensure crime victims safe? We haven't determined that. Why? Because after they're deported back to their company, to their country, there is nothing to prevent them from returning to the United States. And if they return to the United States, charges have been dismissed because they were deported, no conviction. So they're going to come back to the United States with no conviction. Victims of the crime. Why shouldn't I tell crime victims what happened after the perpetrator is deported? Why? Accountability. What happened to the criminal charges? They will be dropped by the district attorney's office. Now you have to remember, the Department of Homeland Security does not want to be associated with ICE. They want to rebrand themselves and distance themselves from ICE. So the state of North Carolina lawmakers want the local sheriffs to take over a problem that even the Department of Homeland Security does not want. And here's why. It gives them more opportunity to work better with their partners and the communities. And that should say law enforcement. So here you have it. House Bill 10 is nothing but a duplication of federal laws that we already have, North Carolina General Statute 162.62. It's a duplication of North Carolina General Statute 162, but besides creating a new law, you have two laws again to take care of the problem. If the person here is undocumented, here's the law to take care of that. If they return back to the United States after being deported, here it is what you can take care of that. But you'll never hear anything about it. You hear my friend here says it's common sense. He always says it's common sense. Well, here's what I say. Common sense is not always common. Why? Duplication of a law that should be common sense. Duplication of a law that should be common sense. We already have North Carolina General Statute 162.62, and we also, remember, we have 2 federal laws. If the person is deemed to be undocumented by ICE, here's the law. If they have returned to the United States after being deported, here's the law. So simply saying common sense, duplication of a law is common sense. So I just want to say this. Common sense, Sheriff Garry McFadden of Mecklenburg County opposed of House Bill 10. HB 10 will not help us. It will not make the cities and our counties any safer. It would only bring fear and a misunderstanding to a already complex criminal justice system. Today, tomorrow, and I always will oppose House Bill 10.